Welcome, friends, to another episode of the DPZ Show. And with me today, I'm very honored to have Dan the Card Man. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me. Again, apologies for the delay in getting this going because we tried to have something worked in a few weeks ago, but I'm very happy to be here. So thank you.
Worth the wait. Scheduling's kind of tough. All of us have normal jobs and lots of things going on. We're balancing lots of stuff. So it's totally acceptable and understandable to have it not always work out the way we want to, or just have to move things around, the date around, right? So very excited to have you on, and nonetheless, very. I mean, you have been a very busy man. The hobby has been alive with nefarious activity, lots of interesting stories. I mean, Dan, you have been probably burning the midnight oil trying to keep up with all of the things that keep happening. It seems like on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, right? I try to stick to like 3 videos per week, but there's stuff that happens that I feel like I just need to talk to as it happens. It's a good way for me to sort of de-stress, forget about the world. So when I see something interesting, I feel like I need to just give a quick comment on it. So yeah, working from home helps with that as well. So I can sort of do it
Yeah,
when it pops off.
yeah. When it pops off, you can just jump right on it. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you feel about the tenor of everything right now? It feels like it just seems like there's one thing after another that keeps happening. Obviously, it keeps you busy. You've got
Yep.
content, but I mean, how do you feel the full? I mean, talk to me about the hobby space and the I don't know what's the word, how everybody's feeling right now. Is it do you feel like people are timid? Are they cautious? Are they concerned? Are they depressed? I mean, it seems like folks are kind of rethinking a lot of things, reimagining the hobby for themselves. You got all the different possible scandals, conspiracies. What do you take from that? I mean, you're talking to a lot of people, and what do you take from it?
I think people are definitely cautious. There's some people that are depressed based on what they tell me in my comments, which is like sort of sad for me to see because from my perspective, like talking about this stuff and being aware that this stuff is happening within the hobby shouldn't really change anything, right? Collecting cards is still fun. You still have your friends that you're talking to and interacting with and all this kind of thing. So it always catches me off guard when people let it affect them so much. Now I'm probably partially to blame by putting out that content, but for me personally, it's sort of like in one ear, out the other in that sense. And I see it happening. I want to comment on it because I want people to be, educated and informed. But as soon as that's done, I go back to collecting cards and having fun. And that's sort of the message I want to give to people. That's what I try and refer to within my videos as well, and remind people on that. It's still fun to be had, right? There's stuff happening within the hobby that's poor, especially from some of these businesses, but that doesn't mean you can't have fun. It just makes you reminded that you need to be aware this stuff is happening, and then you act accordingly off the back of it.
Right. So let's like take a step back in the time. You've got a DeLorean. I think I see a DeLorean back there, right? There's a
Yeah,
DeLorean
there's
back
two. Yeah,
there.
yes,
That's
two.
awesome. I love it. Two DeLoreans. So let's take it. Let's go back in time. Back, not back to the future, but back in time. Not
Yes.
back to 1955 with Marty. Let's. I want to talk. I want to learn about how you got into this hobby space. You're very passionate about it, from what I can tell. You care and are concerned about everybody in the hobby space, not just the little guy, but the big guy, everybody, and that is awesome. I personally think it's wonderful, and it's great to listen to your content. I love your stuff. I listen to it every day. Talk to explain to the audience where you came from. Like how did you get into cards? Was it cards? Was it comics? Was it
I think it was
toys?
everything like cards, comics, toys, video games. I was always the kid that, wanted everything. I'm very obsessive. I have ADHD. So I was the kid that, chased everything, kept everything in mint condition. All my stuff was always in binders. I treated it with like that kind of respect, right? I was very obsessive about that sort of stuff. So it was just as a kid, my mum used to work at a news agency, place that sells papers and magazines and all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure if that's how they're referred to in the States, but they had, footy cards over there, rugby cards. So my mum would bring me home those every day. So I'd open a pack a day, which was pretty lucky of me. But that's sort of where the obsession started. It was with, rugby league cards, and then it went into some basketball stuff, and then essentially collecting anything and everything. I was big into Pokemon, like most kids my age during the 90s, Dragon Ball Z stuff. But I'm sort of a person that collects everything. You can sort of see that behind me. There's a bunch of random different things. So I've always
Yeah,
been a collector.
very eclectic. So you're in, and where are you based out of? Australia, right?
Sydney. Yes,
Sydney.
Sydney, Australia. Yeah.
Sydney. You see, you called it footy. Is that football,
Yeah,
or is that
rugby league, rugby. So we
rugby
call it
league? Got
footy,
it.
yeah. Yeah.
some golf footy. Got it. I'm just trying to get myself correct the terminology here.
It's weird. Like
That,
you have soccer be called footy, rugby league be called footy. You have Aussie rules, which is also called footy. So it's just a bit messy.
I love it. It's awesome, man. It's great. I mean, it just shows us how broad our hobby space is and how we have people like you in Australia right now keeping us all in check, which I love. Again, I think it's just a terrific thing. Okay, so you got into it like everybody else. You've got this sort of energy. You love to collect, but you like to keep things in mint condition. So speaking of condition, grading. Let's start with grading. We're going to walk down all the different hot topics, and I want to get your point of view on all these hot topics, Dan, because you're very convicted in what you feel, and I would love to. This is the place to let it all air out. You're not afraid to go, hey, not so much call people out, but just call out the behavior.
Yep.
Grading. What are your thoughts on grading right now? The landscape, Beckett, PSA. Obviously, they're very much the behemoth, right? They're the market leader. Talk to me about grading. What are your thoughts on grading?
So I think it's fine, but I think where people have misstepped over the last couple of years is they've forgotten what the purpose of grading was. They've also placed too much emphasis on grading itself. So, my issues with grading companies more comes down to business processes and the value they're giving us as customers. I'm an external auditor. I mention that a lot in my videos. So I see a lot of mistakes that happen, and then that just tells me they've got a poor risk appetite. And you can sort of get to that point by all the mistakes. But from a collector's perspective, I think there's too many people placing way too much weight on the slab itself and not focusing back on the card, which is, again, a common sense thing to say, but it just seems so much focus is put on that PSA label as an example above everything else, when you can get cheaper cards, better cards for a lot cheaper, and also raw. But people think that the label itself is sort of going to protect you in every capacity. And we've seen, with guarantees and all that sort of stuff, it's not as safe as what you think it is. And there's just too much emphasis placed on grading in general. Like I can see it has a purpose for sure, but I think people just have the wrong focus on it at the moment.
What happened to Beckett, Dan? Like I have no idea. I have some of my biggest Kobe's they're all in Beckett slabs. I mean, they're rare cards that, the card's probably more important than the grade, but Beckett as a brand, it does cast some doubt, right? I mean, what are your thoughts on Beckett? What's happened there?
You could probably ask anyone off the streets and they're going to have the same answer as me. I've got no idea, because they don't communicate anything. I don't understand how they could lose so much market share over the last 2 years. They've literally done nothing, and you can't even hear anything from them. And I almost get the vibe from them that they're sort of just waiting to sort of see what happens within this industry, waiting for things to go back to normal. But, if they wait too long, like, what's going to happen? You've already got CGC coming in and taking some market share away just based on recent gem rate data, where Beckett, I think, has gone down month on month for months in a row, right? They're only grading like 60K cards a week or something if you were to go off those numbers, which is wild to me. I think it's a good thing if you're a collector, right? Because you can buy Beckett graded cards from 5+ years ago and get probably a more consistent grade based on how the hobby felt 5+ years ago, right? Beckett was the powerhouse for a long, long time, and people, again, forget that, right?
Right. Speaking of the hobby space now and how things have evolved, right? I mean, I've been very vocal lately anyway, because I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that we're always changing. The hobby, as a collector, you're consolidating. Now all of a sudden you're accumulating. I mean, we go back and forth and up and down and all around. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of it, right? Because you change your mind, and that's okay, and we can do what we want. It's our money, and that's what we want to do. And I have a hard time believing I'm any kind of influencer. I feel like I'm pretty small little fish in the pond here. But what I do feel is important to understand is that I think the hobby space 2020, 21, let's say 20, late 2020 through 2022 was an aberration. I think it definitely raised the tide, right? The tide rose, but I don't feel like we're going to see that happen again. I feel like we're kind of into this long stagnant. Cards are going to matter. Certain cards, certain collector bases, right? I'm always big on collector bases. It's all about the collector base. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, on and on you go, right? Kind of goes down that road. And at some point, it's going to be just the card. You just love a card. There's a nostalgic reason why you love that card, and that's going to matter to you. And there's going to be a price that you're willing to pay and not willing to pay.
Yep.
So I feel like that's going to happen. Fanatics comes in, everybody feels like, okay, here's the golden knight, the white knight coming in to save the day, who's going to continue to raise this thing up. I mean, between you and I, well, not between you and I, because we're having an episode, I don't feel like that's going to happen. I
Yeah,
almost
no.
feel like Fanatics coming in causes more questions than
Yep.
answers. What are your
Yep.
thoughts on?
Yeah, I agree, especially with how they want to push, the offerings to us as customers. Is it going to be a focus on breaking? And does that then mean because they have the whole control of the supply of cards, production, supply, distribution, is that going to then incentivize them to push things more towards breakers, towards Fanatics Live? Does that mean then the product being developed is not what, the collector from a few years ago wants? And it's okay for things to change, but the way I've always looked at it is that, the true collectors are the floor for this hobby, right? They're going to be the ones, like you said, that are going to want a card, irrespective of collector bases or anything like that. They're the ones that are going to set that floor price because there's going to be a price that they want to pay, and eventually there'll be a price that they don't want to pay. And unless they're maybe being protected in some capacity, like that's where the concern comes from, a Fanatics and just the trends of the hobby down the line. You also mentioned, 2020 boom maybe coming back again. I know based on what I've seen online, some people are expecting that to happen. Like it's going to come back, but it's not, right? Because people were locked in their homes. People had government money. They had, no money because they had extra money because they weren't going to work. They weren't traveling. They were stuck at home. They had all this excess income that funneled into this hobby. You saw it happen with sneakers. You saw it happen with luxury watches. That kind of money is not going to come into this hobby again. And if it does, people are more educated now, so they're not going to be buying, base rookies for ridiculous prices either. So all that stuff needs to be factored in as well for people that think the hobby's going to bounce back to where it was.
Yeah, the flight to quality is something that's not going to dissipate. I think that's going to be the focus of the mindset of anybody, any collector. People are going to be consuming this content. This content has been well curated up to this point, right? People have kind of adjusted, grown, and become more, educated. We've all
Yep.
grown as collectors, as hobbyists, to go, all right, yeah. And folks that have come in, like I came in 2019, so I've learned since 19 that here's how you do it. I kind of rode that wave. I rode the wave. Don't get me wrong. I'm not denying I didn't, but I've also learned. I went, okay,
Yeah.
I'm coming back to this. This is where you want to be. I'm a financial guy, so I also understand markets, and I can see now how all that money entering the system is hurting. We got inflation. We have to raise interest rates. And there's all this money's now flooding and going somewhere else. It's hot money. It's priced money. That it's transitory money, and
Yep.
it's not the way we all thought it was going to be. And I think this was always there. The writing's been on the wall because this has been happening for years. So, where do you see the hobby going, Dan? Like in your best, I mean, okay. Those who feel like they have a crystal ball usually eat glass, right? I mean,
Yep.
you never can predict the future. But based on everything you've seen, all the people that you've talked to, and your experience in the hobby, what do you think is going to happen as we move like 5 years into the future here in this hobby?
Honestly, I think it's just going to be more of the same, to be honest. I don't see too much drastically changing. I guess it's sort of hard to speculate because we're about to have Fanatics come in and sort of do things to this hobby that we've never ever seen before, right? We've never had a company sort of take control like they have. So it's going to be hard to predict what product looks like in the line and or in the future, I should say. But I just think it's going to be more of the same. I think you're going to see very much the same sort of stuff that you've seen over the last 12 months. People consolidating collections, chasing specific things, and just see a bigger hobby in general, which I think is a good thing. But again, it's sort of hard to answer because it's not like we've still got Panini like we have right now, because Fanatics, I think the landscape's going to change drastically and it's too hard to put a finger on what that might look like.
I mean, do you think this Fanatics entering this space, is that a good thing? I mean, do you think them having this sort of monopolistic position in the hobby space a good thing?
No, I think it's a scary thing for the hobby long term. Especially if it sort of goes unchecked like it has in the last few years. It's a completely unregulated market. I think the only positive with a Fanatics having the control they do is if they do go ahead with their IPO, and I talked to this the other day, they're going to be subject to a lot of different regulations as a result of being a listed entity, right? So that would mean that things would have to be very stringent. Their risk appetite would have to change drastically, and then a lot of the concerns would be squashed by the fact that they're going to have more processes internally and all that sort of stuff. But if it goes the way it's going and you've got, a Fanatics being a Panini 2.0, except having far more power and influence, that's very scary, because if you look at what we've gotten as value as customers over the last 2 to 3 years, it's been crap, right? It's not been good at all. We've had far more sticker autos, far more parallels, things printed to death, terrible patches, terrible QC, terrible product offerings. It's like, where's the excitement going to come? And then I guess the concern off the back of that, maybe back to your crystal ball question earlier, is if that continues for a long period of time, what does that mean for that next batch of collectors that are the ones that are, the kids like we were, right, collecting cards and all that sort of stuff, if they're used to that poor offering and they don't have that attachment to cards like we did, what's that going to look like in 10, 15 years time if, we get more of the same from Fanatics that we did from Panini?
Well, okay, I'll offer a counter argument. Not that I feel passionately about this, but we've only really haven't had an opportunity to see what Fanatics can do with baseball, because they've really had their hands fully on baseball in 2023, like completely, right? We 2022 late. There's the Julio Rodriguez and Bobby, I think it was Bobby Witt issue with the Topps Chrome product. They had to come back. Then the Hobby Light, the only one that had them. The silver packs came through. There were some issues there. But this is the first full year where you've got an opportunity to get your ducks in order and put something out there and be strategic about what you did. I love the patches, the first game patches.
That stuff is awesome. Yes,
that thing is great. So I was like, hey, win Fanatics. I'll give you a win there. Obviously, baseball has seen a 9% increase in overall attendance over the year. I think baseball is on its way back. I am the worst. I'm so biased towards baseball. It's not even funny. So we'll put that out there right now. I'm a big time baseball guy. I think that's the worst kept secret in the hobby, is that I'm a baseball guy and a junior and came here for junior guy. But baseball's growing. And I think they've had an opportunity to sort of jump in there and go, hey, here's how baseball can get better. I've been to stadiums. I've seen Topps in stadiums now. I can see a presence growing.
Yep.
The other thing I've seen with baseball, you have an opportunity with Topps now to capture these moments, base relics, things like that. I feel like that's kind of interesting too. I think there's a different, maybe this on-demand, breaking on-demand, is that where we're heading? I know the other hobby content creators talk about breaking kind of being the future. The Bowman Chrome market, that's a big market. I'm really into the Bowman Chrome market. So I can see how that's been affected. Breaking, Topps now, on-demand kind of cards. So Fanatics has kind of shown us like, okay, we can get hip. We can be, they got Topanga as a card for Topps now. I think Neo was talking about that earlier this week. There's lots of different weird little tangents they can take. I mean, I think there are some wins for Fanatics. They've shown us that
for sure
we can control it. We can do really good things. But I do wonder, you look at this Superfractor mistake, and there are some people that said, was this really a mistake?
Yep.
I mean, do you really have to pump the Bowman Chrome product? I mean, it kind of sells itself right now.
Yep, exactly.
Still, it kind of begs that question. You've made a mistake 2 years in a row. You got your Topps Chrome mistake of last year. Now you got the Superfractor mistake.
Yep.
I mean, is there anything there?
Potentially, like you said, I definitely agree that they're doing a few really cool things, like the new patches and the base relics and all that sort of stuff is right up my alley. I love match-worn stuff. I think that stuff is so underappreciated within this hobby. It's so cool as a fan of sport in general to have a piece of a jersey, and then if you can do the research to find where that jersey came from, to sit back and then watch that match or watch that game is so worth it for me. So if anyone wants to do that, I suggest you guys do that in your own time. It's a real fun project. But there is some stuff to that, right? Because again, when you talk to like Fanatics Live and the fact that they've put in bounties and all that sort of stuff, does that then go to that fuel to the fire of a conspiracy theory around things being, intentionally done the way they are? Or the concern I have as well with Fanatics, you just touched on those two mistakes, but if they're only doing that with just baseball, what's going to happen when they get everything else? And is that going to be something that just keeps happening, or is it going to be a one-off thing that they've had to learn on the job and react pretty quickly? Like, you also had an issue with 2023 Topps Chrome, if I remember correctly, with the backdoored cards. It's cards that were allegedly stolen that weren't put into the product that are showing up with like fake autographs and stuff as well. So that's another issue to add to the list. And what's disappointing about that is they've given us no communication on it, and I found it really difficult to get answers on that. So again, when I see issues like that, when I see like the issues from last year's Topps Chrome, and then issues with the Superfractor stuff, and they respond to this but not the others, it's like, well, was that intentional? That then fuels those conspiracy theories. I don't think this was intentional with the Superfractors. It doesn't make sense. Bowman Chrome was already sold out, so why would they need to do that? It doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I feel like the product's already very popular. It's one of the most popular products they have. It sells itself. The breakers break it like, Adnesium. I mean, they're going to have to pay for the extra, Superfractors. I mean, that's money out of the pocket. I mean, I can't imagine.
Not small fees either. Some of those are big, like 75 grand, I think, is the most expensive one, which is
a lot
wild,
of money.
Right?
I mean, yeah, and I thought that juiced the product a little bit anyway. I mean, now you're going to go try to find that second Superfractor and get a payday like that. It's unbelievable. I guarantee payday like that is something else. All right, let's move on to another topic that's very, very popular right now, and that is shilling.
Mhm.
Obviously, I think you and I and 99.9% of our hobby will agree you don't bid on your own cards.
Yeah.
I'm selling a card right now on Probstein. I am not tempted to bid on my own card.
Mm.
I would just have to do it. I think it's an ethical thing. I think it's a moral
Yep.
thing. But
Yep.
it's a hobby cardinal rule. It's that tribal knowledge you learn. But I think it just kind of boils down to ethics. I mean, you just don't do stuff like that, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Whether you can get away with it or not, you just don't do it. Um, my question comes to defensive bidding
Mhm.
because I feel like it becomes a little bit more of a gray area. Are you buying that second card? I talk about this on my Saturday episode. So this episode is going to follow my Saturday episode, which is perfect because I really want to hear your thoughts on this. I know you just had a recent episode where you're talking about shill bidding and some people that were, apparently, not so much condoning. I don't know if he's even condoning it, but just, is it really that bad?
Yep.
Defensive bidding. If you're truly, because how do we really know the intention, Dan, of the
Exactly. You
buyer?
don't. Yeah. Yep. You don't. So
I mean, go ahead.
it's all right. We're going to say, yeah. So like you don't, right? So, but it's one of those things, right? That's why these auction houses like eBay and these proper auction houses like PWCC, Golden, etc., don't allow you to bid on your own cards because, whilst you don't know the intention of the person, I think history has shown that people are probably not doing it because they're not going to pay for it in the end, right? History has shown. So there's a reason why it's banned, right? So the intention almost goes out the window, in my opinion. If you're referring to defensive bidding, as in if I have a few Tom Brady gold prisms as an example, I want to corner that market. There's a third one that's listed that I don't own. I think that's fine in that case to sort of bid that card up because if you win it for cheaper, right, than what you're intending and you pay for it, what's the big deal, right? You want to corner that market to then own as many copies as possible to then try and offload them and set a new price, right? You see that happen a lot in the Pokemon space. You see it happen a lot with Magic the Gathering. There's a big channel, Alpha Investments. I'm not sure if you've seen him, Rudy, where I think Dustin references him a lot. He does that with some of the original releases from Magic where he's buying as many as possible because he essentially wants to buy them out to set the price. I don't have an issue with that at all, right? That's very different to, bidding on your own card and then pretending that you're going to pay.
But what if your intention is just to price protect?
To not but what in terms of price protect, right? If it sells for the amount that you've bid and you're happy to pay for it at that price, I don't see that as shill bidding, in my opinion.
Okay, that's good to know. So if this is the problem too. You tell me if you feel the same way. I feel like this happens to me. I'll be honest. I see a card. I'm like, gosh, I kind of want it. I start bidding on it. Then I'm like, it's a card I already have. I think I want a second copy, and I feel like maybe I can get it for cheaper. And then at some point down the road, I'll either use that second copy, that duplicate copy, as ammunition to buy a bigger card or color up to a bigger card, or sell the duplicate at some point just to try to pay off or pay for technically the second card I got. You also set your new comp too, right? When you buy that card,
exactly.
whether it's high or low, it is what it is. You pay for it. Obviously, everything's contingent on paying for the card, right? Always pay for the card. But if we're always paying for the card and all that's just assuming that's always happening, collectors we're very I just feel like we kind of go all over the place. We go all over the place within 10 minutes versus like a 30-minute or a 7-day auction. Our minds change constantly.
Exactly.
I don't know. At least for me, I feel like everybody I talk to and me, it's always changing. So on my episode on Saturday, and this will obviously kind of follow into it. My question was, how in the world would we ever be able to establish any sort of continuity and integrity in auctions, eBay, Golden, PWCC, Heritage, anywhere? I mean, just name the auction house. How can we do that? How can we establish? So for a new collector or a demographic coming into this space, we can say with some kind of certainty that this is a regulated, honest space. You can count on the fact that these cards are being auctioned the appropriate way. The buyers that are trying to buy this card are buying it for, legit reasons. I feel like there's just no way we can do that. Is there a way we can ever do that?
I don't think you can ever police it to that level, but I think we could expect more of certain auction houses. Like some auction houses, as an example, don't require proof of identity before you can bid. And I think having something like that in place is a good first step to give some, integrity to your platform, right? PWCC is the business I'm referring to there. You don't need proof of identity to bid, right? You can go in there, make an account with a random ass name, put a phone
Right.
number in, a burner phone, and you make an account, and then you can bid whatever you want. Golden does a lot better at that. Heritage does as well, from what I understand. But eBay, similarly, you can go easily and bid on a card and then push the price up like you see happen all the time. So it's a difficult thing to police, and I don't think you ever get that continuity that we're sort of looking for, that integrity with the process, making sure that things are fair and balanced and all that sort of thing. It's just one of those stuff that as a collector, you just need to be aware that it's a possibility of happening, and be across how you can actually monitor this sort of stuff is happening as well. eBay have a really good feature where you can click on the number of bids on an auction, and it'll take you to the detail of who's actually bidding on those items. And then if you click on those usernames, you can see, number one, the feedback that person has. Obviously, if it's a low feedback, it's typically a shield bidder. But more importantly, it gives you a bidding history from that bidder to that seller. And a lot of the time, these shillers are using the same accounts over and over again. So you'll click on them and they'll have a 100% bidding activity with that seller. And again, that's a pretty quick trigger to say, this item shield bid, I'm not going to bid on it, right? That's the stuff you need to be across. I don't think you can ever be completely protected. It's a very hard thing to manage for these businesses. So it sort of is what it is. You just have to deal with it, unfortunately.
How comfortable are you right now bidding on any platform?
Well, I take a unique approach to buying. So I rarely use my own money to buy my cards. So I'll buy things to flip and then use those profits to buy my cards. So like I do want to make sure I'm not getting shield bid, but in the instance that I get something that's shield bid or trimmed or something along those lines, because I've used profits, I'm sort of mitigating the risk for the most part. Obviously, yes, I'd still like to keep that money as profit, but by me factoring that process into my approach, like I'm super confident. I'm super comfortable, I should say.
So as someone who's really, really hip to all the different various activities that are going on and really focusing on it and paying attention to it and bringing some of that stuff to light, give me an example of when something like that happened to you, where you were a victim in that sense. What did you do? How did you deal with it? What was your process?
It's unfortunate, right? Because I don't think the process and the solution actually works. But I had a few things recently with some items on eBay where I was clearly shield bid and the price got to a ridiculous amount. I still did win. I didn't pay for the item. I reported it to eBay. And eBay basically told me they really couldn't do anything. And then the item got relisted again, and the same person was shield bidding the item up. And then I decided to bid it up even further and not pay again. And then it got listed a third time, and somebody won it for a lot of money. And it looks like a genuine transaction happened, and they paid for it, which is really disappointing. But there's almost not much you can do from a shield bidding perspective like that other than report it. There's been suspicious things that have happened on Golden, as an example, that I've reported to their customer service team, and they've given a really good response, and they act pretty quickly. I've said before, that them as a customer support seem to be really on the money, and they seem to be really eager to help, which is good. But again, it's sort of hard. Like, it's hard to remedy these kinds of situations from a shield bidding perspective. It's see it, report it, and then just that's all you can really do. Or see it and let people know, right, on social media, because some of these shield transactions end up in apps that track this kind of stuff as a genuine comp, and you can't have that happen either, right? So it's more like, okay, this happened, I'm going to report it, and then just talk to people, make sure they're informed.
Well, with that specific situation, you said you went back a second or a third time. What were you hoping would happen that second or third time?
That the person wouldn't shield bid it up again, that I'd win it for what it was actually worth. Because I had some correspondence with the consignor. I basically said, and this was a consignor not based in the US, an overseas international one, and they basically said, no, it's not shield bid. Well, I said, well, this stuff says it is. eBay likes to think it is, or at least what they've told me. So stop shield bidding it. And then turns out they didn't listen and kept doing it. So I was hoping to win the card. It was a big PC item for me, and unfortunately it's gone now. So it is what it is.
And that's
one that I was bidding on.
That's the tough part, Dan. It's because sometimes some of these cards are a card that we emotionally want or need to complete a set, to add to the PC. So it's not as easy to just go, yeah, whatever, I'll just walk away from that card. I think people don't understand that, because that's the easy solution to anybody outside the hobby space. They're like, well, then just let it go, move on to something else. You don't understand. I need that card. There's only one of them, or whatever it is, right? I mean, it's really hard.
Yeah, and you don't know when you're going to see it again either. And it's one of those things too that I've talked to on my channel. I have a hard time placing big values on cards. Like, I appreciate what they are. I think they're awesome and all that sort of stuff. But it's like, do I want to pay $1,000 for a card when I could be using that for my daughter, as an example? So even though I approach my collecting the way that I do, like in those instances where it's like, well, should I just bite the bullet and pay for it? It's like, well, is a card actually worth that much? Should it be worth that much? Yes, people think it is. People spend a lot more than me, but that's just how I feel. Being a kid that's always collected them, it's always been funny to me to have them have these values. It just doesn't feel right to me, because they're just cards that I collected as a kid, right?
It's
So
really funny. I totally agree with you. I'm a big baseball guy, obviously, and one of my favorite cards is 1969 Topps Johnny Bench, the rookie cup card. It's a second year card for him. It's not his rookie card, but it's kind of an iconic card, an important card, a card that's popular. It was the card when I was like 7 or 8 years old. My one of my best friends' dad had one in like a little screw downs, and it was the coolest thing I ever thought. My dad didn't have any of his cards left over, and I just thought it was the coolest card because Johnny Bench is my dad's favorite baseball player, so of course he's mine, right? Growing up,
yep.
you love your dad. So I just followed him like that was the card I wanted to have. I had it was junk wax era, so I had all the '89 Tops and all this stuff that's worth nothing now. But that was like those cards were so cool. And I've owned a lesser copy of it. But you go back, and I'm looking at the card ladder history and looking at the prices for that particular grade of that particular card I'm targeting for that card, and it's like it was $2,000 in 2007.
Yep.
I mean, the card has been expensive for a
Forever.
long time.
Yeah.
And it's like you look at that, I'm like, that's actually really fascinating.
Mm.
Looking back at some of these cards, the cards that were like $20 or $50 or $150 that are now like $9,000, that's got to be kind of concerning, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's got to give you some pause.
Yeah, and it goes to a talking point that I've mentioned a few times in that, a lot of this stuff has gotten to prices where it has because it's constantly being flipped between flippers essentially. And there's a big luxury watch authorized or unauthorized dealer, Roman Schaff. I'm not sure if you follow the watch space, but he's got a big channel, a few 100,000 subscribers, and he talked to how the watch space got to where it was because you had dealers constantly flipping the same watch between each other, right? And the same watch could be sold 50 times in one day, and everyone's trying to get a little bit more money out of it. And then eventually it reaches a point where it's, 3 times retail price. And then you try to sell it to a customer, and customer's like, I don't want to pay that. So we've sort of seen that happen in the hobby with cards like you've just mentioned, where it's constantly going back and forth with the people trying to flip it between each other. But you need it to get into the hand of the end consumer, the collector, for that price to be realized. And I think there's very few collectors that are willing to pay some of the prices that we're still even seeing today, to be honest. It's still constantly being flipped by people that aren't going to hold it for the long term. And like I said earlier, the collectors are the floor for this hobby. So they're the ones that, should be setting the prices.
What about a card that has been sold like maybe 5 times in the last 10 years and it's just gone up in value exponentially? What are your thoughts on a card like that?
That's interesting as well, because again, it just comes down to who's buying it, right? Because you see a lot of cards that have gone to ridiculous prices, and it's hard to know what's justified those. Again, I think they're especially if you're talking about, big cards that are worth, 6 figures, those kinds of things I think are just in a different realm of their own. They're in a completely different universe. So it's more so, my point earlier was more so for the cards that, the average Joe can afford and flip and all that sort of thing.
Right. The more liquid cards. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're trying to establish like this high base level for it that they really have no business being there, right? Interesting stuff. So I guess let me just cap off this episode. This has been terrific, Dan. I mean, great. What you have to say about all these major topics is really important, I think, for people to hear and listen to, because you have a lot of like your content is just you talking to us, right? Just you talking to us, and the back and forth with you is actually really awesome. You're able to kind of uncover things and I know you speak to your audience about all these things and how you feel, but kind of getting it all in one episode is kind of fun for me because selfishly, I'm like, I want to know how Dan feels about all these things. Let's put it all in like one big episode so we can all go back and listen to see how you feel about a lot of these things. So, 10 years from now, what would you like to see in the hobby space? You're still here 10 years from now. Fanatics is doing whatever it's doing. What are the things you'd like to see in this hobby space? Where do you want to see us grow as a community? The businesses that are in the space? Give me your wish list of things you would love to see if you're here 5 to 10 years from now.
I think just more transparency is a big one, especially from these businesses. When they make mistakes are fine, but we see so little information about it. Like, it was really good to see Topps with this, buyback program, because that was a quick turnaround from them, something that we haven't seen before in this hobby. So essentially more stuff like that, having more transparency on pack odds and print runs and all that sort of thing is something that we desperately need. I think I'd like to see more around, information of where relics come from in jerseys and stuff like that. I think we need more. I'm an auditor, right? So I'm really big on process and regulation and all that kind of thing. And I just think we need these businesses to be doing a bit more internally to give us more value as customers, right? Their risk appetite's poor, mistakes happen. I just want to see more transparency, essentially. Because I think like if you get that transparency, the trickle down effect to us as collectors is more value, right? You get more cards, cooler stuff, all that sort of thing. So I think it all starts with the transparency in these businesses, just being open, honest, and giving us, a product that's, worth the amount of money that we're paying, especially today.
Got it. Those are two very important things. I think the relics and having them be authenticated properly and knowing where they come from, I think is a whole nother, there's lots of opportunity there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because it gives you, there's a reason we all flock back to 2003 Exquisite for Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, these patch autos from Upper Deck in the late 90s to the early 2000s. There's a reason we all go back there to get those cards. We don't like the new ones because we just don't know what's going on. Where's that from? Is that some jersey from, a sporting goods store that somebody just touched for a second, or maybe not even that?
Exactly.
I think there's some authenticity and sort of a trust that's been established with a lot of those companies that's kind of universal, that has yet to be shown, other than people like literally committing fraud and taking patches out and putting patches in.
There's
been a trust that's been there, right? That's great. I forgot this question, and I guess we'll cap it off with this. And is there been any new information regarding the Juan Garcia card porn situation?
I've had some stuff come my way, but it just seems to have fallen off a cliff. It's hard to get information out of people. So it tells me that there's probably some lawsuits going on at the moment, which is why nobody's talking, but it's literally fallen off a cliff. I've not heard anything in weeks, which is, disappointing to see. And people that would have watched my channel for some time would have known I had suspicions about that account. It was just doing certain things, very odd things. And it's just interesting the way things have happened, but it's also very interesting that there's not a whole lot of people talking, especially people that were maybe in a bit closer working relationships with that individual than what they're letting on right now. It's just wild to me how we can get something like that happen, right? It's just crazy.
Right. And it's almost like we conveniently forget so quickly, move on to the next thing.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Which is the hobby, right? I talk about that all the time. Hobbies are a short memory. And it goes back to your point, a little bit earlier about shield bidding. And the one thing I didn't touch on that I wanted to talk to on that is it's shocked me how many people were okay with, what essentially went down with Shay and others, right? Like you said, I talked to a pretty big person in my video who said it was okay, or they didn't see an issue with it, essentially. But it goes back to some of the other things we've seen with trimming videos and all that sort of stuff and cleaning products. You've got all this sort of stuff happening within the hobby, and it's always surprising to me how there seems to be a big contingent of this space that is okay with that kind of behavior. And that's a little bit concerning as well, that people can think that's okay. And I think a lot of that comes down to people not stopping and thinking about their actions before they do it. They're clicking on things through a computer. It's really easy to do this stuff now. You don't need a whole lot of effort to shield bid, as an example, or rip someone off. People just need to take that step back and remember they're dealing with a person on the other end, right?
Right. There's a victim. There's somebody else there that's being affected by that. Well, as a banker, a banker and a regulator are rarely going to agree on much. But I can tell you right now, Dan and I will definitely agree on the fact that shield bidding is no good for the hobby. It's no good in general. It's morally unacceptable. You should never bid on your own card. I think you should be an honorable person all the way through in the hobby. You should honor, I've sold cards where I messed up by putting it up there. Someone bought it. I'm like, I honor that. You need to honor your word. That's a big deal in our space. It's unregulated. So we're kind of leaning into that. Right.
Yep.
So I think moral integrity is in the forefront of our hobby space. And I think in the end of the day, the folks that are going to survive the space, the people that are going to be trusted or going to be liked and befriended in the space, they're going to be the folks that are being good. They're going to be good people that care about others, and that want to see the hobby thrive. And they're going to understand you're not going to own every card. You're not going to get the best price for everything. You're not going to make the most on every auction. You're going to lose money. It's going to happen a lot more than you probably want it to. But at the end of the day, you have to be accountable to your own actions. You have to be honest, and you have to have that integrity intact. I think it's so important. So Dan, thank you so much for jumping on my episode. This has been a blast. I love hearing your feedback and capturing so much in one episode. So thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. It was a good chat. I'm always willing to have another one if you're keen. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm definitely keen to do it. I would love to have another. We'll have to do a follow-up one because Lord knows there's going to be more things that'll happen.
Exactly.
It's a great opportunity to talk to you. Folks, this is the DPZ Show. I am your host, DPZ. I've got Dan the Cardman with me. You can follow Dan the Cardman on YouTube, on Instagram, and it's just at Dan the Cardman, right, Dan?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and just go listen to him. Go follow him. He's got terrific content. His delivery is wonderful. He's very professional. You can tell he puts a lot of thought and energy into what he says. He asks great questions. He makes us think. And I think it's important for us to have that. I think it's important for us to always be looking out for that for nefarious activity, because it's always around us. Whenever there's a space that's vibrant, there's going to be folks that are going to try to take advantage of it. So thank you so much. Click and subscribe. Dustin, the Sports Guard channel, I thank him for powering us up here. And Dan, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Cheers. Right. Thank you.
Take care. I'll just exit full screen and end the recording.